Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 107, our first King podcast in the coronavirus era. I don't know if they're going to come up with some sort of calendar attribute for this. This might be the PC, I don't know, post-corona or no, it wouldn't be PC because we're actually living in it. So it's a current corona. So I guess it would be the CC, current corona time frame. With me to share this pain is returning guest, and one that I'm always glad to have back on board is Mr. Bryant Burnette. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm all right, Lou. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about the recent miniseries that aired on HBO, which was The Outsider. And that will be spoilers all the way through. So if you haven't had a chance to see that yet, please do. But before we get into that, I thought we'd just talk in general about a couple of things, news-wise and whatnot, and have a little Jeopardy contest for Bryant. Hopefully you didn't see that episode, but I just came across this article, and I don't think these questions are going to embarrass anybody, so that should be a bit of fun. And then we're also going to talk quickly about The Fifth Step, the recent short story by Stephen King that was put up on the interwebs for free. So hopefully we'll all have a little bit of fun with that. So a couple of items here in the news that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention in case they weren't aware. First up, we were all waiting for the rebirth of the Dark Tower in one form or another, especially after the disastrous reception that the movie got. But the story is just so strong, and media outlets are just starving for content. There's so much stuff to watch nowadays. It's hard to keep up with, actually. Amazon had greenlit a pilot for the Dark Tower series that Glenn Mazzara, famous for his makeup work and Walking Dead involvement, had filmed a pilot and presented it for review. And unfortunately, Amazon turned it down. So we're back in limbo land again. And that's a bit of a bummer.
It's a bummer in the sense that there's not a great show that's going to happen. But I think I'd rather that be the case than them have made a bad pilot but decided to go ahead and make a series anyways.
Right.
And the series end up being bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need that.
No, this is true. I guess with these kind of things nowadays, I guess all of us would just love to be able to see this pilot. Much like when Lock and Key was going through its various iterations, we never got the chance to see the original pilot. And I think I actually had two pilots before it actually got a greenlit on Netflix. But the word I heard on the pilots for the Lock and Key was that it was okay, and that the one that we ended up with was actually better. So maybe that's going to be the case with the Dark Tower series again. I don't know.
I wouldn't care to brag, but I've seen one of those pilots.
Which one?
I saw the Fox pilot.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Is that the one with the actor that was in Terminator 3? I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He played John Connor in the
Thomas Dekker?
Tom Dekker? No, I don't think that's the actor that I'm thinking of. That was another pilot.
It's been a while. I honestly don't remember it all that well. The only person in the cast that I remember is Miranda Otto.
Oh, yes. Yep, from Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Trying to type this up here. Nick Stahl.
Oh, that's right, Nick Stahl.
I believe he was in one of the versions of Lock and Key.
I think that was him. In
Duncan. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Who's that done for? That was done for... Yeah, it was done for Fox.
Fox.
Yep.
And it shows. It's very network television, and it's okay.
Yeah.
All things considered, I'm glad things have ended up the way they've ended up. But
yeah. The Netflix series is pretty good. It was a little too YA-ish for my liking, but
yeah, definitely.
And I guess I think the episode I did the review of it with Tyson Blue, it just the comic book material felt much more grittier and adult than what they end up putting up on Netflix. But it was overall fairly well done. So I'm not really going to complain. It was gorgeous looking, that's for sure.
It's one of those things where I would prefer that maybe they had made a different type of show.
Yep.
But if they were going to make that type of show, they did it pretty well. So
Yep.
I
Yep.
I don't have any actual complaints.
Yeah. Yep. Same here. All right. So Dark Tower's back in Limbo Land. We'll have to wait for another turn of the wheel, as they say. And of course, in this era of coronavirus, we don't know when that could be. I think everything's going to be on pause for a while until the lay of the land gets settled again and we all figure out how we're going to be living in this new world. Hopefully productions of this type will be able to resume at some point, because boy, if we have to do social distancing, it's going to be pretty tough for any sort of endeavor that takes a lot of people working closely together to start up again.
Yeah, social distancing won't so much work if you're making movies.
No, that's for sure.
You can fake some things you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And tied into that, there's a recent NPR interview with Stephen King. And of course, one of the topics is The Stand, which I think if you've been on Twitter, you've seen that King says he's sorry that everybody feels like they're living in a Stephen King story. So,
yeah, that was a great headline.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And I can't help but chuckle when the tag on the coronavirus is that it's kind of coronavirus-19, which if you're a Dark Tower or Stephen King fan, that's obviously got some significance. So whether King wants that connection to his material or not, it's happened.
I mean, somebody had to have done that on purpose, right?
You would think so.
There's no way that's a coincidence.
No, that's one of the levels of the tower, that 19. So I thought that was pretty funny when I saw that for the first time. I said, really? Coronavirus 19? That's what they're going to call it? Like somebody out there has a dark sense of humor.
I foolishly tried to explain that to somebody at work, and all I got was a bunch of blinking. It was like, well, I knew better than to even try.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's too much.
That's back when I had a job, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. There were a lot of us are in that boat. So another reason for this, hopefully, to get squared away fairly quickly. And it was interesting, talking about The Stand, tied into that is the fact that CBS was filming The Stand. And to the best of our knowledge, it was finished production in early March. However, given the current climate, I have no idea when they're going to show this series, because I think it's going to hit a little too close to home right now.
Well, there's not only that, but just because they finished filming doesn't mean that they're done making it, because there's all kinds of post-production.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind for me is, depending on what kind of score that's being done, you can't you can't necessarily get an orchestra together to record a score right now.
That's right.
Most scores at this point are more digital than they are orchestra anyways, so it may be a non-issue. But yeah, to your point, I'd be shocked if we saw it before 2021, personally.
Yeah, same here. And maybe not even till 2023 or something like that. I don't know how long CBS would be willing to sit on that, because they're a streaming service and they need to pay the bills, and that's one of their draws. So
it could also be that if they were to put it out, they never set a firm release date, but the rumors were that it was going to be in the fourth quarter of the year.
Yeah.
They might still be able to get that out and get a huge amount of attention from it, especially if they're able to put forth the idea, which is correct, that, hey, we were already doing this. This is a thing that's 40 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you look at Netflix, I think the number one ranked movie being viewed right now is Contagion. So people do want to see material related about this, but we'll have to see how that goes. It's too bad.
My prediction is 2021. Personally,
probably, yeah. I can't see CBS sitting on it too long. That's for sure. The money's spent; they got to get their return, but we'll have to see. I mean, and I don't know how well CBS Access is doing. I know the Star Trek series, I guess, is getting a fair number of eyeballs, but I think the reaction to all those series has been pretty mixed. Being an old Trekster myself, I've got to say I was pretty disappointed with the Picard series, but and Discovery I've never liked. So
I would hate to send us into a Star Trek cul-de-sac, but I outright hated Picard.
Okay.
Just
Yep.
me.
Yeah, though you're not alone. But there's a lot of people that liked it. So, it's everybody's, it's subjective. So what can you say?
All I can say is I'm hoping that The Stand is finally the first thing on All Access that I enjoy. It hasn't happened yet, but
I can get on board with that for sure. What else was there? Oh, other upcoming projects. Lacey's Story and the Salem's Lot prequel series, Chapelwaite. And both of those we assume are on hold mid-production or pre-production because we don't know how far either one of those got. I'm pretty sure The Stand finished filming at least, but these other two ones are up in the air. And I think you found out on the internet that from Apple TV that they've halted production and everything. So
yeah, all what I've seen is that all of their projects that we're currently filming have been paused, and I don't think that's anything specific to Apple. I know Netflix did the same thing. They halted production on Stranger Things. So
right.
If that one's being temporarily shut down, then you got to figure just about everything is.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
I'd be kind of curious to know. I know studios have insurance policies for breaks in filming that are related to, like, if your lead actor shatters his tibia in the middle of filming. I'd be curious to know if there's any sort of clause in their insurance policies for something like this. Probably not, because it's basically unprecedented, but
yeah,
but it's not impossible.
Yeah, it's like an act of God situation. Interestingly enough, just circling back quickly to the NPR interview that King did, he stated it quite correctly that it's rather surprising that we haven't run into this type of scenario before, given the state of the world, the population counts climbing and whatnot. So this was going to happen sooner or later. It's just surprising, I think now in hindsight, that how long we got by without not something like this happening before.
Well, I should leave that to bigger and better minds than mine, which isn't hard to find. But there are probably arguments to be made that this sort of thing has happened, that it was just, successfully contained.
Right. I guess the last one was SARS.
Well, there was the Ebola near miss a while back. I sort of remember there being a big swine flu outbreak. That luckily didn't really go all that far. But yeah, King, anybody that knows anything about it, as far as I can tell, has been saying, "Oh yeah, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when."
Yes, of course, hindsight is 20/20, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and the last thing, and it's something that's coming up quickly. We're recording this on April 10th, but in just 11 days, King's next book, another collection of 4 novellas, is coming out. If It Bleeds. It was originally coming out in May, I think, and then it got moved up to April 28th, and now it's got moved up to April 21st. But like everything else, according to my Amazon, and I'm in Canada, Amazon Canada sent me an email telling me that they might not be able to deliver it on the release date because of the current situation. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be delayed too long for me and for everybody else out there as well.
Yeah, at this point, if it comes out before the original release date, then, that's icing on the cake for me. I got a similar email. It was one just saying that, hey, we don't really know when we'll get this to you. But
yeah.
Worst case scenario, I'll buy an ebook version and start reading that.
Right.
Which I've never done before, but hey, if not now, when?
Exactly. Because it can't even go to the library. So I guess you could get an ebook version from your local library, maybe. I think the ebooks are still being loaned out. But I actually have a couple of books from the library that I'm not going to be charged late charges for, but I haven't returned them yet. So
I hadn't thought of that.
Okay, so that was some of the highlight news items over the last couple of months that I just wanted to mention in this podcast, since it's been a while. These are the first impacts for Stephen King fans as well, beyond, obviously these are first world problems. We've all got greater, deeper concerns, but this podcast is focused on Stephen King related material. So it's part of the purvey and domain of this podcast to note these incidents as to how they relate to Stephen King stuff. So But of course, everybody's health and well-being and so forth is obviously much more important than these small problems. But this is the nature of the podcast, so please keep that in mind. And don't, if anybody's feathers are getting ruffled because we're talking about this stuff when there's bigger problems out there, we know there's those types of issues, but we're just hoping that this will be a nice diversion from those issues for everyone for a while. All right. So now I have a little surprise that I'm going to spring on Bryant, and everyone at home can play. And we're going to do a little bit of Jeopardy style Stephen King. Apparently it was, this has probably happened more than once, but I don't know how recent these particular questions were used on Jeopardy, but we're just going to go through them for fun. And I think, they start off pretty easy, but they ramp up slightly in difficulty, but Bryant has graciously agreed to be the guinea pig for these questions. So are you ready, sir?
I literally couldn't tell you the last time I had a pop quiz, but let's go for it.
All right, here we go. For 200 points, retired professor Glenn Bateman is one of the survivors of the superflu in this Stephen King novel.
What is The Stand?
Very good. Next, Stephen King novel for 400 points in which Chester's Mill, Maine is sealed off from the rest of the world.
What is Under the Dome?
Very good. For 600, Ben Meir finds his hometown infested with vampires, decides to fight back.
What is Salem's Lot? I feel like this is rope-a-dope. I feel like I'm going to get hit with a very heavy right here in a second.
Well, as Stephen King fans, obviously, we might find these questions a little too easy, but we'll see. I think they ramp up a little bit, but I don't think you're going to be taxed too hard. For 800. Don't you like all the points that you've won so far, though? That's got to feel good.
I'm storing them up.
Unlike the film, King's novella was titled This Actress and Shawshank Redemption. I can see her poster now.
Who is Rita Hayworth?
Very good. For 1,000 points. Needful Thing was King's last story set in this fictional town, also the name of an entertainment company.
What is Castle Rock, Alex? But you are incorrect. It was not the final Castle Rock story.
Right. So this must be an older set of questions.
And, if I had been on Jeopardy, I would have absolutely said it that way. I said, I'm sorry, Alex. I'm not going to be able to accept that question because it's incorrect.
All right. For 1,200, an angry fan makes Paul Sheldon destroy his own manuscript for the novel Fast Cars in this Stephen King book.
What is Misery?
These are really, really pretty easy.
I could have even given you that the title was Fast Cars.
Yes, I'm sure you could have. This is Double Jeopardy for 1,400. Stephen King's Night Shift short story collection includes this one about a deadly cult of kids in farm country.
What is Children of the Corn?
Very good. And how much did you bet?
I forgot. I don't watch Jeopardy enough. I bet it all of it.
And this one is so recent that, but still, here we go. Another Double Jeopardy, 1,600. I'm sure you're going to bet all. In Stephen King's sequel to The Shining, do you need any more?
No. That would be What is Dr. Sleep?
Right. That's where Danny Torrance grows up and fights evil as this title medical man.
I've got two thoughts. First is unrelated to that mostly, but it's something that I wanted to say earlier and I got sidetracked and didn't.
Okay.
Which is that Amazon not going forward with The Dark Tower just means that Mike Flanagan can do 10 seasons of it on Netflix. So
there you go.
So
that would be fantastic.
Yes, that would be fine with me.
Yeah.
And observation the second, obviously those for people like you and me were pretty simple Jeopardy questions, but how cool is it that you could do an entire round of Jeopardy and have it be things that most people would at least be within sniffing distance of knowing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you could probably do a whole show just with Stephen King as the topic.
Yeah, handily.
and at this level of difficulty, really, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of material to pull through. Okay, here's, we did that one. 1,800 points. It just kind of blows my mind here, but I guess they feel because these are not as well-known works that these are more tougher. The Running Man and Thinner are among the novels that Stephen King wrote using this pseudonym.
Who is Richard Bachman?
Very good. 2,000 points. Stephen King senselessly snuffed out this mouse in part 3 of The Green Mile. he'd be back.
Who is Mr. Jingles?
Mm-hmm. Now, this one, I don't know. I'm pretty sure you're going to get it, but this is probably the only one that would probably trip a lot of people up. For 4,000 points, the title of this 70s Stephen King novel was inspired by a line in the chorus of John Lennon's Instant Karma.
What is The Shining?
Very good. That is the last question. So, and I didn't know that last one until just recently for some reason. I don't know why.
You know what? Yeah, I read that somewhere recently too. I can't
I think it was in relation to Dr. Sleep.
Yeah,
or something.
It had to have been.
Yeah, but I didn't know that until like within this last year. So that was interesting.
And he, I know he originally wanted to title it The Shine, but somebody talked him into The Shining instead.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it make even more sense.
Yeah, wasn't that Tabitha? Or I'm not sure. Maybe that was his editor.
I don't remember.
I can't remember. No, I don't either. I'm sure somebody out there for triple Jeopardy points knows the answer to that question. Okay, so that's a little quiz. That wasn't too taxing, eh?
No, I'm the champion.
You are.
I'm the Ken Jennings of
King Trivia.
of
King Jeopardy Trivia.
Of King Trivia in my apartment, at least.
Right.
Beyond that, probably not so much.
Okay. All right. So now, before we tackle The Outsider, we're going to look at, and this is what I love about King. He's just, every year you can almost be guaranteed that something pops out that's unannounced, like a treat to fans. And thankfully, in these internet ages, we usually get access to them fairly quickly too. And that would be a short story that was released about a month ago now, I guess. It was in the Harper's March magazine, and that was called The Fifth Step. And this is a very short story. I guess you could call it a story with a stinger to it. And I thought it was a pretty solid story. I don't think it's an outstanding Stephen King story. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts about it. And maybe you can just do a quick summation of this, of the story as well.
Yeah, I pretty much agreed with you on that. It's obviously a story that's all about the ending.
Yep.
And I've still only read it once. I should go back and read it a second time to see if it works for me a little better. The first time I read it, though, I was reading it and sort of feeling like, well, I'm not really into this. But then I did like the ending. And since I got to that, I was like, oh, okay. I see what was going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same thought process as you.
As far as the summary of it, it's really simple, and I'm probably missing some details, but a guy is, if I remember it correctly, sitting on a park bench while maybe on his lunch break or something like that. Another guy comes up to him, has sort of a strange proposition where am I getting this correct? Does he just want to apologize to this man sort of as a stand-in for other people in his life?
Yep.
And
basically, yep. As
the story develops, one guy kills the other guy, and that's that.
Yeah, the stranger who's sitting at main character's name Harold Jamison. He has a particular park bench that he likes to go to in Central Park to read the Times, and this younger man there is on his bench, so he's kind of hoping he'll leave, but instead, the guy actually starts up a conversation, and interestingly enough, the person that's sitting there, he doesn't give his real name. He says, "Just call me Jack." So I don't know if that's supposed to be an intimation of Jack the Ripper or something like that. But then he basically goes through this story about him being an AA, and he talks about 5 steps of the program, and each step gives a darker glimpse into this character, Jack. And by the time we get to the 5th one, it's where he's apparently some sort of a serial killer. And Jameson ends up becoming his victim for the 5th step. And he quickly dispatches him and then thanks Jameson for helping him out with that 5th step. So it's a story that, like you said, when you're reading it, it's kind of going, okay, whatever. But then when you get to the end, you go, oh, okay. And then you want to go back. At least I did. I want to go back, read it, and then see the buildup again, which is hidden in the story, but it comes across a lot better on the second or third reads. And a short story. I think if it's over 3,000 words, I'd be surprised. So it's a real quick stinger in more ways than one. And it feels like early King to me. So I don't know if this is something he pulled out of his trunk or what, but it feels like early King. but because it's so lean, and yet there's a lot in it if you do read it again.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about it is that it's, once again, King returning to the ground of talking about addiction issues.
Yep.
And that's
very good point.
Something that he has done, many, many, many times. And it's always amazing to me that he seems to come at it from a different angle.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's probably one of the things that helps sell the plot twist at the end, because at least for most constant readers, I sat down to read this. It's in Harper's Magazine, so I'm not necessarily expecting a horror story.
Right.
I just thought he was writing a straightforward, dramatic piece about a guy with addiction issues. And then twists the knife at the end, and very effectively, I have to say.
Right. And he presents you with really two likable characters, or sympathetic characters. And even, because Harold Jamison's just lost his wife, and he's just, I think he's just recently retired. So he's trying to form a routine to keep going on after losing his wife. And this other guy's struggling with this addiction problem as well. And he's very polite. And even when he kills the guy, Jameson, he thanks him very politely. And
he seems like a good guy.
Yeah, he does. And his last line is, "You'll be in my prayers tonight." Like, it's all very civil and polite, but underneath it all, it's pretty dark and disturbed. So it's a lot more layered, I think, than first blush. So it's something that I've come to appreciate.
Yeah.
But it really does feel like early King, because it's so lean and short, and you're just not used to that with except for Elevation. I guess that's the last piece that he's written as short as this. But again, it's amazing. It's another showcase piece for King, creating two characters that feel like real fleshed out people instead of just plot devices. So for any would-be writer, it is actually a really good piece to look at, because it's so tight and lean and yet layered, and which is pretty amazing the more I look at it.
I would hazard the guess that this story came almost exclusively from the fact that King had the idea for the ending and then wrote a story to go with it. But that makes it even more exceptional that the characters are interesting.
Yes.
Because what that indicates to me is that he's not content to just sit down and write an ending. He has to find a way into it, and his way into it is character.
Yes, and that would be what would make that, if he had the ending in mind, that would make that even more unique, because King hates knowing the ending to his stories. He'd rather discover them. But maybe with a piece this short, that worked for him because he didn't lose interest in it, because he was able to bang it out in maybe one or two sittings. I don't know.
I'd be curious to know.
Same here. So if you haven't checked that out, it's still up on the internet. You just type in The Fifth Step, Stephen King, and it'll take you to the Harper's Magazine page, and you can check out that story there. You can read it in 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your reading speed, I guess. And, read it once and then come back to it the next, after a little while, and come back to it again and read it again. And I think because you know the ending, you'll appreciate the nuances and the subtleties of the story, because I think it's pretty amazing, actually.
I definitely want to read it a second time now.
Yeah. Yeah, because at first blush, it's like you said, it's okay. But then you go, damn, that ending changes everything. So, yeah.
I think isn't that what they call an O. Henry ending?
Kind of. Yeah, kind of.
I always kind of think of it as a Rod Serling ending, but.
Yeah, very Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to turn to the meat and potatoes of this episode, and that will be our review of the 2020 Outsiders TV series, which, of course, is based on the 2018, or is it 2019 Stephen King book?
2018.
2018, yeah, time flies, eh? Jeez. So this was HBO miniseries that to date has only one season, and it aired from January 12th until March 8th. There was a bit of a break in there, I guess. Or let me see. No, it aired every week once it started.
I think it was 9 weeks straight through, because the first two episodes.
Oh, it was a double.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And just looking at the ratings for the individual episodes, it's, it was in the nines, a couple nines, high eights most of the time. Interestingly enough, the last 3 episodes probably got the lowest. Oh, no, I must have been looking at another site because here in IMDb, Tigers and Bears, the second last episode actually got 8.5. Interestingly enough, both sites rate the must/can't episode, which was the final episode of the season, as 7.3, which is the lowest ranked episode of the entire series. So I don't know if that speaks to Stephen King endings or just endings in general. We can get into that a little bit. But of course, The Outsider is a Stephen King take on an impossible crime scenario in which a crime is committed and the perpetrator of that said crime and possibly seems to be in 2 locations at the same time. Now, you could argue that a better story would be one where relying on elements of the supernatural or some sort of science fictional device were not employed and there was actually stayed as true to real life as possible. But I think within the confines of this construct that's King created for this particular story, I think the book handled it pretty well, and I thought that the series handled it masterfully well. I'm curious as to your feelings on that, Brian.
I spoiler alert, I loved the series.
Okay.
I did not necessarily love the last few episodes.
Okay.
Specifically in terms of the way El Cuco was handled.
Okay.
I see what you're saying, and I don't even necessarily disagree with it.
Mm-hmm.
But there were certain aspects of the way that they portrayed El Cuco that, to me, either needed to be more fantastical or less. For example, all of a sudden, he, every time you see him, is growling like a bear, which doesn't really make all that much sense because this is a supernatural being, but it's a supernatural being with a human body. Right. So where are those noises coming from?
Yeah.
That's not a deal breaker by any means. It's just a little tiny
irritant.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
And then maybe a little too early to get into the post-credit sting at the end, but
yeah, let's save that till the end.
Yeah. So there were some things like that didn't really work for me as well as they probably could have, but it doesn't really do anything to diminish my feelings about it as an overall series.
Right. Okay. And let's get into that. And I think where I'm coming from with my comments is it's not so much the content of the individual episodes, but it's rather the execution and tone of the series overall. I found that this was a very gritty and realistic, almost like a documentary approach that was taken with this. A lot of camera shots were done long with the characters that were distance, usually more, they were further back in the frame than you're normally used to in a drama. The world felt very real, and all the characters there's no pretty people in this episode or this series really. And they all dress in everyday work clothes. They all look rather frumpery. And this is very much a blue collar world, even like the professionals in this world, like the lawyers and that they're not like the city slicker type lawyers. They're very rural. The whole atmosphere of the show has felt very rural, not very metropolitan. And I think that and it was slow paced as well, but they used silences to a great effect. So overall, I just found the presentation and the directing style, which it's pretty amazing because it was very consistent, and which is very, I have to applaud the showrunner. I guess it would be, I don't know if it's Richard Price or somebody else, but the look of the show was very consistent in style and shot style and everything through all the episodes. And I found that rather remarkable. And it really lent to the validity of the story, in that usually in horror shows, characters tend to accept these impossible situations too quickly. Whereas in this one, they were, especially the main character played by Ben Mendelsohn, Ralph Anderson, he was struggling with this whole concept of El Cuco right till pretty well the second last episode, if not the last episode. So I just thought the style and execution of the show elevated the material pretty well throughout the whole entire run of this first season.
Yeah, I agree. Which is not really a surprise from HBO because that's kind of HBO's thing.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, it's not like the same people make every show for HBO, but HBO has a definitive style to them.
Right.
And it's always seemed to me like that was a great fit for Stephen King, because that's what you get from Stephen King when you sit down to read his books. You get the prose equivalent of that. So that was my hope all along, that that's what we would get with an Outsider series on HBO. And for my money, we got it.
Right.
Like I said, a few little niggles with the way a few things were portrayed, but all in all, no big deal.
Yeah. So let's sort through the cast here quickly, because there was really no weak link in here. And of course, probably the one that's going to give the most conversation is going to be the actor who played Holly Gibney in this series. But let's just quickly run down here. Ben Mendelsohn was fantastic as Ralph Anderson. And he's probably came to prominence with Star Wars Rogue One for a lot of us, even though he's been around for a long time and he's got a pretty lengthy acting career list. But I also remember him from Ready Player One. So he's pretty good at playing the bad guy. So this was a nice change of pace for him. I thought he was fantastic. Mare Winningham, who seems to have been around forever, played his wife, and she was solid as well. Jason Bateman, in probably I guess the most impactful role, but I remember reading the book, obviously, when he was killed on the court steps so early in the story. That really threw me for a loop. Did you have the same reaction when that happened?
Oh, most definitely. And
yeah,
I would love to talk to somebody who watched the series cold to see if they had the same reaction. My guess is that they probably did.
Yeah. But I know my wife did, because she hadn't read the book when she watched it. She's, oh, shit.
Yeah. That's the only reaction to have. And I even still had a slight version of that, just because they got to that point so soon.
Yes.
But it worked.
Yeah. Absolutely. So then we have, who else was here? That was Julianne Nicholson, who played Gloria Maitland. She was very strong. She felt very real, and her anger and pain. The scene where she's listening to Holly talk about how Cuckoo was, her reaction to that was priceless.
Yeah,
it was so well done. It was the proper reaction that everybody would have had. So, and then all the actors that played like the filling roles, like for the lawyer, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the lawyers, the private eye, the cop friend that Holly made.
You talking about Jack? Oh no, her romantic interest.
Yeah,
Andy.
Oh, there he is. Derek Cecil played Andy Catfish. He was a nice addition, because that's a problem with TV shows. You are visual dramatizations of work. You need some sort of external device for allowing the audience to get a look into the character's head, because otherwise they're just going to be monologuing all the time. So I thought he was a good addition.
Yeah, I don't think he's in the novel at all, is he?
No, I don't think so.
But it feels like he would have been. So yeah. So it didn't feel distracting, or it didn't feel like filler. But he did have a moment that we'll get to. I thought that was the only instance where I thought the TV show writing went down to the dumb level just to make something happen that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And I don't know if you know what I'm referring to, but I will get to it in a bit. But if I don't, I have a similar complaint. So we'll see if we're in lockstep on that.
That's right. I also really like the police detective, or he was Mexican, I believe. There's Yul Vasquez. He played Eunice Sablo. And I thought he was well done. And then there's a lot of actors that popped in and out. But finally, we have to circle down to Cynthia Erivo, I believe is how you pronounce her name, who played Holly Gibney, a different Holly Gibney than the one that we've seen in the Mr. Mercedes TV series. I'm not sure how I feel about her portrayal, maybe because of in the book and the Mr. Mercedes TV series, it seemed like her autistic tendencies were more pronounced there than in here. They were played subtly, but I can understand why they did that. They because everything in the show is much more subtle, done in a much more subtle manner. But I didn't dislike her performance. I can't say if I liked her better than the one for Mr. Mercedes. It was a different interpretation of the character. If I had any disappointment, is that her character should have had more of an impact to me than it did in this series. But I think because of the muted nature of how everything was done, maybe I'm expecting too much from her in this particular situation.
No, I don't necessarily think you are. I have a theory about that. It ties into the thing that we just talked about we were going to talk about later. So maybe I'll save that.
Okay.
What I'll say, though, is that for me, I have never been a Holly Gibney fan personally. I don't dislike
Okay.
her.
All right.
I don't really
Mm-hmm.
get it. I actually
Okay.
do kind of get it a little bit better now because King actually speaks to this in the interview that he just gave NPR,
Right.
which is basically just that he loves Holly. Like, I think
Right.
he's literally in love with her. And, well, doesn't he say that in the interview that he wishes she was a real person so he could, quote unquote, hang out with her?
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, which, hey, that's fair. That's great. I'm not as taken with her.
Okay.
She's fine, but like if she never shows up again, it's not going to bother me.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the Mr. Mercedes TV show goes, Justine Loop she's fine,
Yep.
but it's kind of the same thing. She doesn't really do anything for me all that much. I loved
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia Erivo as Holly. The way I felt when she showed up was, oh, here's the real Holly. Here's the Holly that I can care about.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And that maintained through almost the entire season.
Okay.
But at the same time, I can see how if somebody is a bigger fan of the Holly of the novels than I am, that some of this might have been like, oh, well, this isn't really Holly. This is somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she definitely didn't detract from the show. So I'm cool with that. What else do we want to talk about here?
We haven't talked about my favorite character, which is Jack. He's the Renfield. He's probably not my favorite character. That might be overstating it a bit, but that was probably the performance that I was the most impressed by.
Yes. Yes. I agree with you. He had the most emotional, most impacting arc, I think, of any character in the series because you felt for the guy. I mean, he was a jerk, but he was trying to fight the El Cuckoo's control of him as well. And I thought that was really well played.
Yeah. Yeah. He just, to me, leapt off the screen every time he was on it. And that may be because he's doing things that are more externalized than most of the other characters. So it's not even necessarily that his performance is better because everybody's great. It's just, I guess he has the showiest role. But
yes,
but I kind of remember thinking when I read the novel that character seemed just off in some way that I couldn't put my finger on. But I felt none of that watching the series.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, he was the most dramatically interesting character for sure because he was being so proactive, and plus he had that like the scene where basically he was beating himself up, even though it was El Cuco. But that was really well done. And I think his best moment was when he refused to take his partner's baby into his arms because he knew he was something screwy was going on with him. And he just didn't want to even take the chance of somehow the baby getting contaminated by it. I thought that was probably the most affecting moment for me in his arc.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
Yeah, that was really well done. And then, of course, his last moments in the finale when just before he dies, when he tells him to go kill the creature, that was also a really good moment.
Yeah, I could have watched an entire episode of just he and Holly driving around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember reading some reactions from people where they were like, well, did we need all of that? Like, that was boring. Why wasn't there something happening?
Really?
Yeah, I saw this several places. It's, to each their own. But my thinking on that was, man, you're watching for a different reason than I'm watching.
Yeah, different strokes. Yeah, because that was probably the most tense section of the entire series, really. It reminded me a lot of scenes in Breaking Bad where you would just have, because of the characters' stories before they met each other, when they actually got together, you're just like waiting for, you could hear a pin drop, and every slight little movement when the meeting with the chicken man for the first time, and they're just sitting at the table across the table looking at each other, and like the tension level is off the charts. Like that whole car ride, I was like, holy crap. Like what's going to happen? It was intense.
I'm guessing if you don't know the novel and don't have any real reason to assume that Holly's going to survive, that it's even more tense because if you're that person, you're watching a show where they killed off Jason Bateman in episode 2. So there's no reason to assume that anybody is going to make it the whole way, except maybe for Ralph. I assume you probably take Ralph as the show's main character.
Yep.
If you're watching it cold.
Yep. And the tension level was high in other aspects too, because everybody around the victims those families were being destroyed. So you thought with the whole Maitland family, because the youngest daughter was seeing this apparition, and then Ralph Anderson's wife, Jeannie, she saw the apparition. So like there was a lot of side tension going on in all these households. So I thought that was really well constructed. And, the tension level was always there. And my wife hated the music. She said, this is beyond creepy. This is just really, I can't even, it's like itching powder. She says, I can barely stand it. But as the series went on, I guess it wasn't as bad, or she just got used to it. But the first couple episodes, she says, man, that music is driving me crazy.
I love scores anyways.
Right.
And I thought that was a really good one.
Yeah, I thought it was really effective.
I don't know that it has a lot of potential to listen to it while you're out for a walk or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't, it wouldn't work listening to it on its own. At least for me, I don't have the urge to listen to it, but during the course of the episodes, I thought it was really effective. So what do you think? So we have from a structure perspective, we had 10 episodes. Did you think it was too many, just enough?
I remember thinking around maybe episode 5 or episode 6 that things had slowed down maybe a little too much.
Right.
But I mean, I think if I was going to cut it down, I might have only cut it down by one episode, if that. But I tend to be a more is more type guy anyways. Yeah. I wouldn't have wanted it to necessarily be 12 episodes, but at no point did I become disengaged with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, same here. I agree with you. I think 1, maybe 2 episodes, it would have been a really tighter, kept the level of tension a bit higher, but I don't really have any complaints about it. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that loves the extended edition of Lord of the Rings, and I love the extended edition of Dr. Sleep. If you guys haven't seen that yet, I highly recommend you get the Blu-ray version of it, because that extra half hour, with all good stories, it actually makes that movie seem shorter than the theatrical cut. I was so thoroughly engrossed in that extended edition, and I'm wondering if this one has any extra scenes that if we ever get a physical release of it, there might be extra scenes added into it, much like they did with Haunting of Hill House. So we'll have to see. Possible.
I know there's a Blu-ray edition coming out, or at least was scheduled to come out at some point in May, maybe. I haven't actually looked that up, but cool. But I know it's in the works. Yeah. I have no idea what's on it.
What else was different about the pace? Well, yeah, Holly got introduced into the series quite a bit quicker than I was expecting. So that was okay. I think her introduction in the book was better than it was in the series, but I may be misremembering that. But she just sort of seemed to come in pretty, but then that's the way the series was. Like she just sort of came in with minimal fanfare. But I think that's just the way they played it. And it felt very Law and Order-ish or police procedural-ish. I don't know. But they really muted the horrific aspects of the El Cuco as much as they could, and whether, like I think you alluded to earlier, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not so sure. But because the problem is you've set up this impossible scenario, and then I think for a lot of people that may not know that this is, I'm hopefully they saw during the promos all the time, the Stephen King's The Outsider, that they realized some sort of supernatural stuff was going to be involved, because when it is revealed that it's this El Cuco, it lets the air out of the bag a little bit, because you've set up this scenario and you're going, well, how can this be possible? How can this guy be in 2 places at once? And then besides using a twin or something like that, I think that's just something that's inherent in the story that you have to go along with, that, yeah, this is how this was possible. Or it's a mind screw or something like that, much like Shutter Island. Have you ever read that book or seen that movie?
I've seen the movie.
Yeah, where they set up like the impossible room escape scenario or the locked rooms scenario. And then it turns out that he was just had mental issues. And that's why that's how they got around that scenario, which really, for me, let a lot of air out of the bag in that movie as well. So, but here it's a Stephen King story. So you're expecting something weird to come up at one point or another. And I think that they handled it in the best fashion possible, really, without basically just throwing reality out the window.
Yeah. I think the series had the same problem that the novel had, which is, just as you say, that once you get to the point where you find out that the impossible isn't actually impossible, mm-hmm. it does deflate the mystery, because how can it not?
Yep.
But and that was my problem with the novel. But this is another scenario where I should probably go back and give it a second read to see how it plays once I know that that's the case.
All right.
Because I don't know that I don't know that the twist there is really the point.
No.
I think the point is just the opening section getting you to believe in something impossible.
Yeah.
And I can point you toward a specific piece of writing that Stephen King has done on that subject, which is his introduction to Nightmares and Dreamscapes. So everybody, after this podcast is finished, your homework assignment is to go take that book off the shelf and go read that introduction, because it's fantastic. And what it's about is Stephen King writing about how when he was a kid, he believed everything anybody ever told him. He believed every story about a UFO that he ever read. He believed every story about Bigfoot that he ever read. He believed all of it. And that the way he sees his job is to communicate that belief to readers.
Right.
And if you look at The Outsider from that perspective, to me, that becomes really interesting. And it becomes even more interesting when you put that show on HBO, which is a network that they've done some fantasy things. They've done Game of Thrones, Westworld, and now The Outsider, Watchmen. That's the other one I was trying to think of. But for the majority of the time that they've existed, that's not been what HBO has done. They've done stuff that's very palpably set in the real world. Maybe it's heightened a bit, but they're dealing with real world concerns. So you got to figure that even today, the average HBO viewer is sitting down to watch The Outsider if they don't know that much about it, just thinking it's another version of True Detective.
Right.
So what Richard Price seems to me to have done is decided, hey, I've got an opportunity here to do that thing where I can try to make people who wouldn't believe in things like this believe in it, if only for 10 seconds.
Yeah, and the Ralph Anderson character plays the avatar of that for the audience, and I thought that was pretty well handled. And Ben Mendelsohn was, he was so solid in this. It was just a treat to watch him play this character. So I really enjoyed his portrayal. Not the sexiest role because his journey is more internal, but he was definitely after Jack Hoskins' character, he was definitely the most intriguing to me. And I was expecting it actually to be Holly, and it wasn't. So, and I actually enjoyed some of the other characters from what I call the posse more than her as well. Yeah. So,
well, what you get so well with Mendelsohn as Ralph is that he gives you opportunities pretty frequently to just watch him think. Yeah. You're not privy to what he's thinking, but he's such a good actor that you can see that thoughts are taking place, and then it's up to you to fill in those blanks, which that type of approach probably doesn't work for every viewer, but it works for me. And it worked at a very high level for me throughout the entire season.
Agreed. And I also like how the show tied in the death of his son into his pain and the setup of the opening of the episode, actually, where the public arrest of character whose name I cannot remember again.
Terry.
Terry Maitland. I thought that really drove home his motivation for agreeing to that kind of a setup. And at the same time, he distanced himself from actually physically going out on the field himself to do the arrest.
Yeah.
So
that's an improvement on the novel, just point blank.
Yeah.
And that's why you hire a guy like Richard Price to be in charge of a show like this. Yeah.
So his pain and his wanting, which initially led him to want to expedite the arrest of Maitland and finding him guilty, and then realizing that this impossible scenario, that something else might be afoot, was still enough to drive him to actually want to get to the truth. I thought that whole arc for him was really well done. So, kudos to the writing on that. A definite improvement on the book, and Ben Mendelsohn sold it for sure.
And they avoided the trap of having Ralph's son be a murder victim.
Yeah.
Which a lot of crappier versions of this show would have probably gone that direction. Like, for example, if you had hired a schmuck like me to write this, which you would never do in a million years, but if you had, because you were trying to save a buck, that's the kind of idea I would have come up with.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You might have come up with that too. I think you're selling yourself short again.
Maybe. But it's to the show's credit that they didn't do that, because if Derek Anderson had been a murder victim, then there's at least the potential for Ralph to go out and find who committed the murder and have some closure that way. With it being cancer, there's no closure for that. That's just a permanent state of existential dismay that he's got to live with the rest of his life.
And I think it's worth mentioning, and the show doesn't, because I know this is a hot button topic for a certain segment of the population out there. The show has, all the women on this show are strong characters, but it doesn't, but the show doesn't put a pin on any of them. They're just women who have their perspective on things and their sense of what's right and wrong, and they just go about living their lives. They all felt really real to me because of it. So, Glory Maitland was great, Jeannie Anderson was great, and the Holly was great as well. So from that perspective, there was no, I'm a woman's liver, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff going on in here. It just played out and it felt very natural. And that's, from that perspective, the show is a textbook case of how to show strong characters on both sides of the gender line without having to put spotlights on any of the characters to pull that off.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's, as we inevitably do with all these kind of conversations, let's talk about the ending, because that's, unfortunately, just like the short story we talked about, the endings tend to form the large portion of your overall evaluation of the series. And while I thought the episode ended on a fairly strong note, it also introduced every moment, every show, like in some shows they do it every episode or whatever. There's a dumbing down of the characters doing dumb things that you wouldn't do in real life just in order to advance the plot. And I thought the moment where this reared its ugly head was when the Andy Katovich character decided that he was going to try to get into the car and drive away so that he could get better cell reception. And I'm going, really? You're pinned down by a sniper that he's an expert sniper from ex-army, ex-military, and you're going to try to drive away in a car and present yourself as an open target to him. I just thought that was a really weak and unnecessary way to kill that character off. Like, he could have just been one of the first victims when Hoskins opened fire. Instead, they had to set up this weird scenario of him trying to get better cell reception, which I just thought was really clunky.
That hadn't really occurred to me, but
okay,
now that it has been presented to me, I totally agree with it. Although he does seem like the kind of guy that, number one, is probably a little dense, so might be inclined to do something that stupid.
But he's also an experienced law officer, so
this is true.
I didn't buy it, but now I'm interested to hear what your
my complaint about it was that he was killed at all.
Oh, okay.
I don't feel like that's what that story was leading up to.
Okay.
I think there's no interest to be had in him being killed, especially given how little a reaction to it Holly had, because she doesn't seem to be particularly affected by it at the end of the episode.
Really? I thought they had a beat there where that showed that she was.
Yes, so. in the moment. But later on, like when she's leaving Ralph's house, granted, I've only seen it once, but that was my feeling, is that she should have been a little bit more scarred by it.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, it felt like what it was building up to the whole season was her being open enough to the possibility of believing that she could have a relationship like that.
Right.
And that would somewhat mirror Ralph's journey of believing that there could be something more than what he thought there was as well. So to me,
right. Yeah.
Andy disappearing out of the story does nothing for the story.
I agree with you. Unless they're setting something up for, and then we'll talk about this a bit more, is for the supposed second season, if there ever is one. But maybe that's a seed or a hook for the next season.
Possible.
But yeah, I agree with you. Killing him in this story really didn't accomplish or provide any added dramatic weight to the story.
It just seemed like
it just felt kind of cheap.
Yeah, it seemed like the kind of thing you would do on a shitty version of this show.
Yeah,
if you're under the dome on CBS, that's the kind of thing you do. To me, it didn't feel organic for the type of show that you make on HBO. Plus, I liked Andy. What?
Yeah, there's always that too, right? Yeah, he was a good guy. So that's the only really, to me, was the dumb character doing a dumb thing just for a plot point. But it was a plot point that didn't have any real payoff, as you mentioned. So unless it's something that they're holding for maybe next season 2 that we might be getting. I also want to mention, because I've jumped through the episodes, but I thought also the sequence at the episode was Foxhead, I believe, where they were having that carnival at the outside the mines there, where the El Cuco was trying to pick up the boy. I thought that whole sequence was really well done as well. And it had a kind of a Pet Cemetery vibe to it because everybody was wearing those animal masks and that. So I don't know if that was a intentional thing or whatnot, but I thought that was a highly effective sequence as well.
I thought in general that was probably one of the best episodes.
Yeah. The tension level was pretty high in that one too.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the actual last few sections of the episode, again, this comes back to, and I know Hans didn't like it. He thought it was anticlimactic how the creature was killed, but it's returning to a recurrent theme in King's works that once you actually get to the final confrontation with a villain, they're just really nothing more than a bully, and they're weak if you get past their masks, so to speak, and actually confront the real person themselves. And that happens for the most part here too, though I thought the way they staged the sequences, for a moment there, I was afraid that when, was it Claude Bolton showed up, the real one, I thought, oh, please don't do a switcheroo where we think that we've killed El Cuco, but it's actually really Claude Bolton and the El Cuco character is going to survive.
I had the same thought.
I'm glad they didn't do it. I'm glad they didn't do that. So, because I thought, oh no, here we go. Now they're going to pull the old switcheroo, but thankfully they didn't. And it's led to an interesting setup, I guess. I don't know if, what were your feelings on Ralph Anderson's final moments with El Cuco? Did you buy his behavior there, or how did that seem to you?
I would probably have to watch it a second time to really have a solid handle on how I felt about that. I thought all of that stuff was really good, except I didn't like the way that El Cuco had the whole morph effect thing going on.
Right.
I would have much rather they just did what they did in the novel, which is he bashes the dude's head in and a bunch of red worms squiggle away. Because I don't care how good, and the effects were great. The morphing, they've come a long way since The Stand, but I don't care how well you do the effects for that. That never looks real. Yeah, because it's not real. Whereas, even if you replace the guy's head with a hollowed out cantaloupe, like this was a Troma movie or something, and stomp on it, and a bunch of red worms come out, there's a reality to that. That to me, that would have been more in line with the kind of show that they were trying to make. Yeah. So to me, that's another area where they kind of dropped the ball a little bit right at the 1 yard line. Yeah. Once again, I
wasn't entirely sold on it too.
Yeah. But apart from that, I thought everything was good. I thought that they did a pretty good job of focusing it on Ralph and on his character's journey. Yeah. And I say that once again, having only seen it the once, but weirdly, I had to go skim through that section of the novel after the episode ended, because in my memory, which is obviously faulty, in my memory, it was only Holly that went into the cave in the book. Oh, wow. That's completely not the case. So I was watching the episode going, wow, they've done a really good job of making it to where Ralph can go in there with her. But no, that all came from the book. And I remember when I read the book that I had been deflated by the last third or so of it. Not in the sense of it being bad. I just didn't feel like it lived up to the setup. Right. But as I was skimming through reading it after watching that last episode, I was like, man, this is really good. Just as writing. All of the ending stuff is really good. Yeah. I just think it's a convention of storytelling that we expect the hero to have a big showdown with the villain. And there's usually in praise of the villain moment that happens during that. And King's doesn't really do that. Every time the hero meets the villain, it's rather anticlimactic. All the big stuff has happened before that moment, really. Yeah. And that's an interesting take by King on how he does that, because obviously the biggest example, well, the two big examples are, and with a
pretty well the same characters, Flag in The Stand and Flag in The Dark Tower. How he's dispatched in both of those stories is rather anticlimactic.
And that's not even the worst in The Dark Tower.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and not to sidetrack us, but I do love The Dark Tower book 7, beginning to end. But at the same time, it won't be spoilery for the sake of those that might not have read those books, but there is a character who meets his end right at the end that, I like it on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm like, wow, you were building that up for years and that's it?
Yeah. Yeah, the closest thing I can think to it is the White Walkers from the Game of Thrones. Like, we don't know how George, if he ever does finish his books, is going to handle that. But I thought what happened in the TV series was very anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So it's the same kind of scenario, because if you string the audience along, and especially like in a TV series, which goes on for years, in a book, it's not as bad. Depending on your reading speed, it's going to take place in a shorter period of time. But if you have to wait like 8 seasons or 7 seasons for something to happen, and then when it happens, that's it. Like it has to match the anticipation of what you've built up for the audience, and that's really hard to do. It's not an easy trick to pull off. And I think this Outsider TV series did a pretty good job of it. But the only thing that really mutes it, and probably this is the last point that you were going to make as well, is the TV being what it was. They want to serialized stories continue, whereas the outside of the book is start to finish, and that's it. Then you have this business model where if something's successful, and The Outsider was very successful from HBO, from what I understand. It's got better ratings than Westworld and Watchmen. So they were very happy with the reaction to this show, that it's inevitable that they want to set up a sequel. And that felt really... And again, because I'm locked into the book, and the Ralph Anderson's character, to me, his arc is done. The whole idea that he wants to partner up with Holly and continue hunting down these boogeymen, it didn't really sit well with me. I don't know if that's what you were going to say.
Pretty much. I'm inclined to give all these people the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, absolutely. And just going on the source material.
If they make a second season, obviously they're going to be going completely off book. But, you know, Richard Price, not a bad writer. So I trust him to have come up with an idea that would probably make for fertile ground.
I agree.
I'm not seeing it based on what they presented in the episode, because just on a fundamental plot level, like, okay, you're showing me that Holly got scratched, which implies that El Cuco would now be taking over her. Mm-hmm. But El Cuco's dead, so...
Or is he?
Well, if he's not, then they've really dropped the ball, quite frankly. They've turned into CBS's Under the Dome at that point.
Yeah, I'm really hoping if they're going next season that they're going to go with a totally different mythology and a different kind of creature or whatever.
Absolutely. That would be the way to go. So why do a scene where you show that she's been scratched? I can't make things work one with the other. And I'm not Richard Price. So once again, for the time being, I'm inclined to assume that he's got an idea that I'm just not thinking of. I'm not seeing it right now. But will I watch it when and if it comes on? Oh, you best believe.
Absolutely. And I'm jumping off of that statement is, in an interesting way, this second season could be setting up something that could be, to me, almost a spiritual ancestor of one of my favorite shows growing up, was Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Oh, interesting.
These two characters could really form the basis for a show mythology that could take those two television movies, The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler, and which turned into the Monster of the Week series, which never matched, in my mind, the scope of the movies. And now if you watch those movies, if you've never seen them, you're going to find them quite quaint. But I can tell you, at the time when they came on, they scared the shit out of me. So
I have never seen them, but I want.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They've been on my list for years.
Yeah, they're on Blu-ray now. They're fantastic.
I believe somewhere, because this is a thing that exists on my computer. Mm-hmm. I've got a folder of nothing but bookmarks of Blu-rays that I want to buy.
Oh yeah,
and those are both in there.
Yeah, yeah. The Night Strangler is not as strong as the Night Stalker, but the Night Stalker is, it's fantastic. Again, through my obviously rose-colored perceptual lenses, because when I watched it the first time, it just scared the shit out of me. But
Yeah.
I mean, Derek McGavin plays the everyman so well, and it has a fantastic theme song that I just love. And it seems very quaint by now, by today's standards, but it was quite something. And so this show, to me, could be that sequel that they tried that horrible sequel a couple of years ago. This obviously had no understanding of the charm and the allure of that show, because it was basically this everyman character just trying to hunt down the truth. And Ben Mendelsohn and Holly Gibney are basically those two characters, and you don't have to bring any of this secret scientific research CIA kind of nonsense into it. This is just everyday people tracking down things that everybody else won't believe in, doesn't want to believe in, or likes to pretend doesn't exist. So I'm hoping that this, in a way, could be a spiritual ancestor to the Kolchak the Night Stalker series, and that would be fantastic, because it's the setup of these two characters and their relationship and the mood and tone of the show. If they keep that, could be fantastic. But as I said earlier, please don't repeat El Cuco mythology. Do something else. Pick up some other obscure or lesser known creatures that we don't normally think about beyond the big universal staple of creatures. Let's do something new and different.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
Well, it seems like there's maybe some sort of a plan for that already in place, because there were questions about Holly that the first season brought up that it also never really addressed. Like, there's the whole scene where you see the younger version of her in the MRI machine, and I remember there being sort of an implication that something happens to her while she's in it, but they don't show what that is. And then, to me, the interesting part of the end credits scene at the end of the final episode was her thinking that she saw Jack there.
Right.
So that implies to me that maybe whatever has happened to her,
I see
and
dead
what
people
will continue to happen. Yeah, exactly. And that'll be kind of a cheesy way to keep Mark Menchaca on the show playing Jack, which I'm fine with, because he's great.
Yep.
So I'm on board with that. My hope is that El Cuco's done, except maybe for wrapping up Terry's exoneration,
right?
Something of that nature. But otherwise, they definitely need to just do something else altogether. For example,
for sure,
Ralph and Holly could join the FBI and open up a division that kind of like investigated things like that. I don't know what you call that, but I feel like there's a catchy title for it that somebody could come up with. And like, one of them believes in everything and the other one only kind of believes in some things.
Exactly.
I think that's a great idea, personally.
Yeah.
HBO, I am unemployed, so if you're looking to hire somebody to work on this from home, even, I am available. Just hit me up and we'll see what we can do. Yeah.
And listening to what you just said, I probably believe that that's the show that they're thinking of more. But that then again, the X-Files was a spiritual ancestor, was the Night Stalker.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, it's a good lineage. Even though the X-Files was a show that I never thought lived up to its potential either. I thought it was one of those situations where the parts were greater than the sum.
It's just waiting on somebody to come along and perfect it.
Yeah. So, So to recap it all, I definitely think it's one of the best. I don't think it's the best adaptation of a King material, but it's definitely up there. Top tier stuff, highly watchable. To do a rewatch of it again, now knowing how the arc plays out for everybody, but and see if there's little Easter eggs that I didn't catch the first time. Yeah. But I highly recommend this to anybody who hasn't seen it yet. It's a top-notch production. Ben Mendelsohn is fantastic, and as you so rightly pointed out, Mark Menchaca as Jack Hoskins was great as well. Holly Gibney was Cynthia Erivo, was pretty good in my opinion. I don't think she was fantastic, but she was solid. So it was some pretty creepy stuff, and it was handled as delicately and masterfully as this type of material could be, because the tendency to go schlocky is always there, and the show was not PG-13 by any stretch of the imagination. It could get gory when it wanted to, but it was done with somebody who had a understanding of how to use that type of material most effectively. And I thought the show was, it pretty well fired in all cylinders, except for that cell phone thing in the last episode. Don't think I had any moments where I thought that's a horror trope dumb thing a character only does in horror movies. That never really happened here. So
yeah, I'm not sure where I would rank it as far as all King adaptations go.
Mm-hmm.
I am 100% sure where I would rank it in terms of King adaptations for television, which is number one with a bullet.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything on television that even touches it among King adaptations. Maybe Storm of the Century, although that's an original.
Maybe, yeah.
Beyond that, I got nothing.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I can't really think of anything else. I mean, I was mostly okay with 11/22/63, though I didn't like the way they used that one character that they brought along that was not, that didn't happen in the book, and then he died when he fell out of the window. I thought that was a really, that was bad.
I don't want to say I hated 11/22/63 because that would be grossly overstating it, but I thought it was kind of bad.
Okay.
And it actually, it makes for a decent mirror image to The Outsider in one way, which is that with The Outsider, people doing the adaptation obviously sat down, looked at the book and said, okay, how do we effectively expand this into the length that we need it to be?
Right.
With 11/22/63, somebody sat down and said, all right, how do I shrink this to the level that it needs to be?
All right.
And in doing so, they cut out about half of the things that make that novel great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and by the way, I'm afraid that the same thing is going to happen with The Stand.
10 episodes is pretty tight. Yeah. For such a big book. Yeah.
The Stand should have been 3 seasons.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, like 3 books, 3 seasons.
Yeah. So to me, The Outsider is just, a few complaints aside, it's a perfect example of taking source material and capitalizing on it. And doing the things that make it work. Yep.
I don't disagree with you. I think that I actually agree with you 100%. I think this probably was the number one television adaptation of a King work. I can't think of anything, because most of the other adaptations are pretty old now. Yeah. I always have a soft spot for The Stand, but it's dated. And
The Stand, I love The Stand. I just rewatched it last week.
Oh yeah.
Because I had not watched the Blu-ray that came out.
Yes. Yeah, and, boy, is that ever, what a difference, eh? Gorgeous.
Yeah, no, it looks wonderful.
Yeah.
And I still love that too, but it's from a completely different era. And
yeah. It's and if somebody from today's generation watches it, they're kind of like, really? It's like when you show them John Carpenter's The Thing, and they just go, what? This looks so fake. All this real animatronic puppetry stuff just doesn't work today's audience. But
I don't want to talk to those people.
I love that movie.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. But then we're of that generation, right? So, but anyhow, you're bang on. This is definitely top tier, number one. I don't think you're going to find a more mature, restrained, but knowing when to hit the gas type of adaptation of a King book.
Yeah.
And the fact that I only have one dumb moment in the whole 10 episode run, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and they respect the source material. There are changes and additions and expansions, but it's very much grounded in the source material.
Yeah. You don't mind changes if it improves on the source material. And we mentioned, the whole thing about Ralph's son, how they handled that.
You have to do things to make a TV show work as a TV show. You have to do things to make a movie work as a movie.
Yeah.
Where I always get frustrated is when somebody doesn't understand that that's a thing you have to do. If they only try to replicate the novel, or if they only try to just do their own thing, that's a huge topic. I could go on about that for another 4 hours. But.
Yeah, I hear you. But it basically, for me, what you're saying is it boils down to the fact that books are much more internalized. So if you're changing the book, it's because you want to externalize something internally that's important to the story. That's the only way you can do it, is by adding another character, or maybe collapsing 2 characters into one because they can serve dual functions. Those kind of changes I don't mind. But when you throw in something that doesn't add any substance to the existing story, then that's where you just go like, what was the purpose of that? Like with Picard, spoiler, being saddled with a condition which by the end of this series run really had no impact on the whole overall course of the season. So why bring it up in the first place? So it's those kind of things that just are so irritating.
Oh, we hates it, Precious.
All right. So that's our thoughts on The Outsider, the HBO series. No word on seasons 2 at this point, and probably not for a while, given the current conditions that we're all living under. But hopefully we will hear something. And I think that it sounds like we're both projecting that it will, if there is a second season, that it'll be some sort of spiritual ancestor to other shows that we've liked before. So that would be cool. What else is there? I think that's about it. Is there anything else you want to mention about The Outsider that hasn't come up?
The only thing I can think of is that we probably should have mentioned at some point, if we didn't, just how good Jason Bateman is.
Yes, yes.
Because
to
some extent that it's easy to gloss over that because he's in 2 episodes and then he's gone. But in those 2 episodes,
the emotional heart.
Yeah, he is fantastic.
Yeah, he's really quite good. I keep hearing about Ozark. I have to watch that series.
I haven't watched any of it either, but like
everything I've seen him in, he's really good. I'd love to see him in more Stephen King material. It's too bad he's not in The Stand, actually.
It's something worth hoping for, that people will look at this and say, oh, okay, that's what we need to do with Stephen King.
Yes. This is exactly like a textbook case.
Specifically, HBO would look at it and say, what else is there out there that we could do? That's not restricted to The Outsider.
Yeah, but that's a problem. Most of everything else is already spoken for.
Yeah, but you could always hope that maybe somebody could, what's a good example? Well, hell, just reboot Under the Dome. I stand by the idea that it's probably too soon, but I stand by the idea that there's still a great series to be made there. Let's let somebody better qualified to do it. But let's see, what's another good example?
Well, we still haven't had Duma Key. I kind of think that's the one that Mike Flanagan wants to do.
I would be all on board for that, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's probably about time you could do a decent remake of Needful Things for television.
Yeah, or Salem's Lot.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, because they did that TNT remake with Rob Lowe was horrible.
And then, we've already mentioned it. There's The Dark Tower.
Yeah.
There may be somebody out there saying, hey, that's seasons worth of stuff if we do it well.
I wonder if season 2 could be based on whatever Holly Gibney story we're getting in If It Bleeds. I don't know. Maybe.
It's entirely possible. Oh, and it got announced basically as soon as The Institute came out that was being shopped as a TV series. So,
and I believe it had been picked up by somebody, but I don't have that in front of me. But so there's The Institute. Yeah, even like Golden Years, I'd love to see a remake with that.
Oh,
and a continuation of the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because that's a love-hate show that's very much of its time, but the episodes that are good are really good, but the ones that are bad are really bad too. So I love the idea though.
I literally have a list of questions to ask when and if I were ever able to interview Stephen King, which is never going to happen, but just in case. And one of those questions is, Mr. King, I apologize. This isn't a question. This is a statement. Please finish Golden Years.
Yeah.
I think that's number 1 on my list, actually.
And I also have, if I had one, for him, I'd always say, like, what were Ben and Mears and Mark Petrie doing after the events of Salem's Lot? I think there's potential for a good traveling vampire killing show there.
Oh, no, like they're going to show up on Castle Rock, aren't they?
Oh, you think so?
I hope not. Not a fan.
Of Castle Rock? Series? Yeah, I haven't finished season 2 yet. I thought the actress that playing Annie Wilkes was doing a good job, but I don't know. It went off the rails on some other aspects, and I haven't finished it yet, so I can't say.
Well, enjoy.
Okay. Which season did you like better?
I liked season 0 before it existed.
You like the idea better than the execution?
To answer that question seriously, I guess I'd say season 1, because at least it's not wrecking a perfectly good Stephen King novel. Or 2 of them.
Oh, now you've got me really worried. 2 of them. Oh, goodness.
Or 3 of them. 3 of them.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
That's just me. Most people seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, but they're not real fans.
Oh, no, I wouldn't even say that. I would just say that I'm a notorious grump.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. I appreciate you coming on again, Bryant.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
A lot of fun as usual. Yeah, it's always a hoot, and some good points were brought up. And I always appreciate your pearls of wisdom that you bring to the podcast.
I bring what I got.
You bring what you got. And are you still blogging away? The Truth Inside the Lie?
pretty regularly.
Great. I highly recommend everybody check that out.
It's a nice distraction.
Yes, absolutely. And we do need distractions nowadays.
Do we not?
Do we not? All right, sir. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be talking to you.
All right, Lou. Have a good one.
All right. And to everyone out there, as usual, stay safe, but stay scared. The end. Pool.